The Senate will come to order. Senators will be in their seats. The clerk will call the roll.
Alley, Baumgartner, Berger, Billinger, Boyer, Bowers, Denning, Dahl, Estes, Falscado, Fitzgerald, Francisco, Givens, Goddard, Haley, Hardy, Hawk, Hensley, Hildebrand, Holland, Kelly, Kirshen, Longbine, Lynn, Masterson, McGinn, Olson, Peterson, Petty, Pilcher Cook, Pyle, Rogers, Schmidt, Scooble, Sulentrop, Sykes, Taylor, Tyson, Wagle, Wilborn.
Senators and their guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to the chaplain.
Please bow with me. Heavenly Father, we're in the middle of the week. Monday's past, and we look forward to Friday. We're in between the beginning of this session and the adjournment at the end. We're in the middle. And this is where we really need you, here in the middle. We thank you for an eager beginning and pray for your presence in the end. But right now, we need you with us in the middle. When seed time has passed and the harvest is yet to come, where we find ourselves is in the middle. Storms occur in the middle. All kinds of problems arise in the middle. Like the Apostle Paul in Philippians 3, verses 13 and 14, we'll be forgetting what's behind us while we're pressing toward a productive conclusion. But here and now, we're in the middle. We're not where we were when you originally brought us here, and we're not sure when you'll take us out of here. We're focusing on the dash in the middle. We're looking forward toward a glorious finish. But while we're here in the middle, we need your encouragement and guidance. Lord, I've asked you for words that will increase our faith, that we may trust and obey you just a little bit more. In the words of the hymn writer, not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the skies, but your smile quickly drives them away. Not a doubt or a fear, not a sigh or a tear can abide while we trust and obey. Thank you, Lord, for answering prayer. Thank you for your presence while we're going through the middle. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen and amen.
Please continue standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On a point of personal privilege, the chair recognizes a senator from Johnson, Senator Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, I have a special guest in the chamber with me, and this is the man I've been married to for 30 years. The last time he was in this chamber is when I was sworn in 2007, and I think that says a lot for him because he He understands what I do up here, and he knows to stay away from me while I'm doing it. So he runs a small business back in Olathe, and works very hard to make sure that I can serve here. So just give him a nice Senate hello.
Welcome, Jeff. We're glad you're here. Messages from the House. The clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bill 2416 and House Bill 2606. House Bill 2416, an act concerning income taxation by Committee on Taxation. House Bill 2606, an act concerning driver's licenses by Committee on Transportation.
This constitutes introduction of those bills previously read. We are now ready for final action. On this roll call, we will take the following. The bills on page 2, House Bill 2470 and House Bill 2502. The clerk will read the titles.
House Bill 2470, an act concerning alcoholic beverages. House Bill 2502, an act concerning alcoholic beverages.
The clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Berger. Billinger. Boyer. Bowers. Denning. Dahl. Estes. Vascadeau. Fitzgerald. Francisco. Givens. Goddard. Haley. Hardy. Hawk. Hensley. Hildebrand. Holland. Kelly. Kirshen. Longbine. Lynn. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. Peterson. Petty. Pilcher Cook. Pyle. Rogers. Schmidt. Skubal. Salentrop. Sykes. Taylor. Tyson. Wagle. Wilborn.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Chair recognizes the senator from Miami, Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My vote is aye.
Any additional senators want an opportunity to vote? Does any senator wish to change their vote? Does any senator wish to explain their vote? The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. 39 voting in favor and 0 opposed to House Bill 2470 and House Bill 2502. These measures, having received the required constitutional majority, are hereby declared passed. The chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The chair appoints a senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The Senate having resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole, we will now turn our attention to those items under General Orders. There's been a request to pass over House Bill 2476. With no objection, the bill is passed over. We will now turn our attention to SCR 1611. The chair recognizes the senator from Butler, Senator Masterson, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Senator, you may proceed to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one is actually, it's a well-vetted, well-understood issue. This is the Article 5 petition for convention, also known as Convention of the States. Just a little background. Kansas is unique in the sense that it is the only state in the nation that we need to have a 2/3 majority to pass, so we are looking for 27 positive votes. On that, thank you to the co-sponsors. I think we have 17 co-sponsors. It's currently been passed in 12 other states as we stand. The latest, I think, North Dakota, Texas, and Missouri. It's also been considered this year in Nebraska and Iowa. Interesting enough, in Iowa, they have a significant number of Democratic sponsors of the same convention of states. So I thought that's just being an interesting note as we talk today. With that, this is a limited convention to the three subjects: fiscal restraint of the federal government, limitations on the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, limitations on terms of the federal officials. So it is constrained to those three items. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I would actually just like to stand for questions.
There are questions for the senator from Butler. Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have a brief question. I'm sure many of us have heard quite a bit about this particular SCR. And one of the issues that's come up that we've heard about that I've been concerned with, and I wonder if the senator from Butler will help me understand, is were a convention to be called, what would constrain or what would keep the topic or the topics focused on the reasons that they were called, Mr. Chair?
Senator from Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's actually a great question, because that's one of the kind of circulated arguments that are used with it, the quote-unquote runaway convention, right, that you would be outside of your jurisdiction. So couple points there. So in the convention, the rules are one state, one vote. 34 states have to call the convention under the similar article, which this is the one we're talking about here. So you would be, by the 34, restricted by rule to these, and then 26 states, 50% plus one of all states, would have to concede to any changes of rule. And I would further address that even if you walk down that road of a potential of getting outside a topic or running in an area that doesn't seem to be appropriate to the broader nation, anything coming out of this convention is a proposed amendment which have to be ratified by 38 states outside of the convention. So I understand that that's a circulated concern that things may get out of hand, but two things: there's no historical basis for that. There's been 40-some interstate conventions, if you will. None Article 5, I would concede, but none have run away, if you will. So you have no historical precedence for it. The rules of one state, one vote can't change. And then you have the back end safety of 38 ratified states.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Well, I thank the senator from Butler for that clarity, as he's right. That has been a concern of mine, and I thank him for attempting to allay some of my concerns with the concurrent resolution about the quote-unquote runaway convention. I see many people who have supported the concept or this concept have not been as assuring, from a Supreme Court justice to actually one of the founders of this, Mr. Meckler. They didn't, at least their comments did not leave me with the same confidence that the senator from Butler does on the prospect of there being the runaway convention. I do appreciate the answer from the senator from Butler, and we'll continue to listen to the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator.
Senator from Shawnee, Senator Hensley.
Mr. Chairman, we had a discussion in our caucus about this Senate concurrent resolution, and there was a discussion about perhaps us proposing several different amendments, but we've decided that we are not going to do that. We feel like senators should vote on whether they think this is a necessary thing to do or not. And I really don't have any questions for the senator from Butler. I've got a number of questions, but I think I would prefer to just make comments with regard to the resolution. The Constitution of the United States has been amended 27 times since 1791, and in every case, the amendment process is contained in Article 5. There's actually two processes in Article 5, and the one that's been utilized in each case is 2/3 of the Senate and the House approve an amendment, send it to the states, and 3/4 of the state legislatures then must ratify it. And in my opinion, I believe this process has served our nation quite well. The most recent amendment, recent as of 1992, was the 27th Amendment, which prohibits members of Congress from raising their salary until their current term ends. That took effect, as I say, in 1992. The amendment previous to that was near and dear to my heart, Amendment 26, because that was the amendment that was ratified in 1971, excuse me, that gave 18-year-olds the right to vote. And the first time I had the opportunity to vote as a 19-year-old was in 1972. I was able to vote in both the presidential and the state elections. Of course, the argument back then was, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds were being sent off to Vietnam. And so if they were, drafted to fight for this country, then they should be entitled to the vote. Under the Constitution, the other provision says in Article 5 that if 2/3 of the state legislatures call for a convention to amendment, one must be convened. And I believe there is one question I will ask the senator from Butler. I believe he said that there are 12 states that have actually passed this type of resolution. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
Senator from Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is correct. There's actually been some 400 convention-type amendments passed over the term of our country, but there are 12 with this current language similar to this currently.
Senator from Shawnee.
And those are resolutions that have passed. Is that right, Mr. Chairman?
Senator from Butler.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Senator from Shawnee.
So, the way I look at this, supporters of a convention, and among them, of course, is the American Legislative Exchange Council, are now targeting more than a dozen states and are running campaigns to push for such resolutions there. And therefore, what we have before us is Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611. What remains a mystery to me are a number of issues. For example, what will be the process for impaneling a convention? how will the delegates to the convention be selected? How will the convention rules be established? Who will determine what issues the convention can consider? How much of our current Constitution could be rewritten and changed? That means that, in my opinion, under a constitutional convention, anything goes. There are no rules or procedures in any of these issues because the Article 5 provision is silent to that. If a convention were called, how many delegates would each state get? How long would the convention last? Article 5 provides no guidance on those questions either. And in its propaganda promoting a convention, ALEC claims that Congress could limit the scope of the amendments that a convention could consider. But I think it's important to point out that there are many prominent constitutional law experts that disagree that Congress could limit the scope, because the Constitution provides no authority above that of the Constitutional Convention itself. Now let me read to you a statement that was written in 1983 by former Chief Justice Warren Burger. Warren Burger was the Chief Justice that followed Earl Warren, and he was appointed by President Nixon. He says, or he wrote, and I quote, "There is no way to effectively limit or muzzle the actions of a constitutional convention. The convention can make its own rules and set its own agenda. Congress may try to limit the convention to one amendment or one issue, but there is no way to assure that the convention would obey. After a convention is convened, it will be too late to stop the convention if we don't like its agenda." Burger went on to say that the delegates to the first Constitutional Convention, and we've had one in the history of the United States, in 1787, ignored the limits placed on them for amending the Articles of Confederation. If you recall from your American history class in high school, that was our first government, the Articles of Confederation. Confederation is defined as a loose association of states. And guys like Benjamin Franklin and James Madison and George Washington knew that it was fatally flawed. And initially what they talked about was ways to improve the Articles of Confederation. But instead, when they came to Philadelphia to discuss those improvements to the Articles, they quickly moved to create an entirely new, much more centralized government that had really no resemblance to the Articles. They also ignored the ratification process required by the Articles, which required approval by Congress and a unanimous consent of the 13 states. They set up a ratification process that completely bypassed Congress and completely bypassed the states. Ratification of the new Constitution called on convening state conventions for the purpose and for that purpose, and required the approval of state conventions in 9 of 13 states. And they did that because they knew that there was no way the new Constitution would be approved by all 13 states. They set up 9 out of 13. But let me return to Warren Burger's opinion. He says, with George Washington as chairman, the delegates were able to deliberate in total secrecy with no press and no leaks. A constitutional convention today would be a free-for-all for special interest groups, television coverage, and press speculation. Our 1787 Constitution was referred to by several of its authors as a miracle. Whatever gain might be hoped for from a new constitutional convention, and again, these aren't my words, these are Warren Burger's words. Whatever gain might be hoped for from a new constitutional convention could not be worth the risk involved. A new convention could plunge our nation into constitutional confusion and confrontation at every turn, with no assurance that focus would be on the subjects needing attention. And in fact, another constitutional scholar, Supreme Court Justice Anton Scalia, also opposed a constitutional convention. You know, Anton Scalia wasn't exactly a liberal. He was pretty conservative. And he said, and I quote, "I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. Who knows what would come out of it?" Another issue related to the process of calling a constitutional convention is that there's no rules to determining whether the 34th state threshold has actually been reached. Because there have been states who have passed resolutions calling for a constitutional convention, only later to find out they made a mistake and they've actually rescinded those resolutions. The question would be, if they passed the resolution and then rescinded it, could they still be added to the number of those who passed the resolution? That's a question that cannot or has not been answered. And to me, the most troubling possibility about opening up our Constitution to a convention of states is the absolute undue influence that special interest groups would have on it. I believe powerful, well-funded special interest groups will spend massive sums of money to influence the selection of delegates and then to influence the convention itself. And as we know, under federal or state laws, there are no limits on wealthy individuals in terms of what they could spend to influence the delegates in the process. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I am going to vote against this resolution. I think it sets up a dangerous process for our country, for our democracy. I think the founders got it right in 1787 when they met in Philadelphia and devised a constitution that has worked well and that has really, when you think about it, it's pretty remarkable, has really only led to 27 amendments from or since 1791. I don't know if this has the 27 votes here in the Senate required to pass. I haven't lobbied anybody. I mean, we did have a discussion in our caucus about it, and I know that there isn't a single yes vote among the Democrats for this, but I don't know whether there'll be enough votes on the other side of the aisle to come up with the 27 votes. I do thank the Senate for listening to me.
Senator from Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. A lot to unpack there. I tried to track it. I would agree that they got it right. But Article 5 gave us this mechanism. They got it right. A couple other things I'd like to comment on. Actually didn't take much of a search on Justice Scalia to find out that he had actually in writings debunked the myth of runaway convention and proclaimed no fear of that. So I'm not sure where the other information came from, but you can peruse that yourself. But as to Justice Berger, another thing that we never want to erode our own input and our own power. These are coming from Supreme Court. So just to give you an example, everybody thinks we're talking about this Constitution, right? This is the original. Well, what we're talking about is this Constitution, as annotated by opinions of the Supreme Court, of which Berger was a chief. So you certainly wouldn't want anybody else to erode your power. This is what we're talking about. And it's time for clarity. A couple other things I'd like to unpack. There's all this. We go through this list of, well, what about this and what about how many delegates? Well, that's up to the states. None of that changes the fact there's one state and one vote. Quite frankly, we could send 165 delegates. We got one vote. We could send one delegate. We got one vote. It's up to us how we want to participate in the convention. Doesn't change the rules of the voice we have as a state. So a lot of that is just nonsensical fear and in and of itself propaganda to try to create that fear. One other thing I'd like to just touch on, because we've heard a couple times now this year, this kind of ALEC theme, American Legislative Exchange Council, that somehow this is top-down driven. That's also false. ALEC is one of the few membership-based, bottom-up driven councils of associations of legislators across the country. It's an issue there because it's an issue that's important to a lot of state legislatures. It's not top-down driven. I think we heard in an explanation of vote earlier, ALEC popped up with it's bad policy like most of ALEC. Well, those policies aren't top-down driven by the group. They're driven by the members. That's like saying nothing good comes from Shawnee County. No relation. So we'll leave it with that. So it's a bottom-up, and the polls are in favor of this. This is not a left, right, Republican, Democrat issue. It's a people's issue, and the polls bear that out. This particular version, 67% approval with the population, right? And it's interesting, the resistance comes, and this is borrowed out some testimony, from kind of the fringes of our sides, right? The right, and the left are the opposition to it, for different reasons. But middle America is interested in having a voice in this, and they were given that appropriately by the founders. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for the Senator from Butler? Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Wagle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the senator from Butler County who's carrying the bill, and the senator from Ford County, the chair of Federal and State Affairs, and the committee who worked the bill, had a hearing and listened to what the people had to say and kicked the bill out. As a parent, I have raised all my children telling them that the United States has a terrible debt problem, and don't count on having any retirement by the time you are age, what now is 70. Don't count on any money coming from the government. Don't count on health care. Don't count on Medicare. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, save your own money, because the government is broke. I've pulled up the debt clock. It's the official debt clock. Any of you can pull it up on your phone. Any of you can pull it up on your computer. It's under usnationaldebtclock.org, and the clock is ticking. Right now, in the top left-hand corner, you've all seen the debt clock. It says we're in debt, $20,856,000,000, et cetera, dollars. But if you scroll down to the bottom of the debt clock, where it takes the U.S. federal current deficit of $5.9 trillion, the Social Security liability that we owe of 16.7 trillion, the Medicare liability we owe of 27.8 trillion, and our total unfunded liability, and no one refutes this, it's over 112 trillion dollars. That is a debt that's hard to understand and conceive, because when we were in school, we didn't talk trillions. I remember talking millions. I remember talking about billions, but we didn't have to talk about any concept in the trillions. So let me give you an analysis of what $1 trillion is. If you were to stack $1,000 bills in a stack to create $1 million, the stack would be 4 inches high. If you were to stack $1,000 bills so that you could create a total of $1 billion, the stack would be 364 feet high. But if you were to stack $1,000 bills so that they would create $1 trillion, the height of the stack is exponential. It becomes 63 miles high. It's hard to conceive the runaway debt that our elected officials have ignored at the federal level. And that's why we have what I call a populist movement rising up. We want to take back control of our destiny. We want our children to have a future. We want our grandchildren to have a future. Just recently, November 6th, 2017, our new CIA director, who has many sleepless nights, he has the inside story. He made an announcement to the world, to the United States of America. He said the most serious threat facing the United States isn't North Korea, isn't Russia, isn't Iran, isn't ISIS, CIA Director Mike Pompeo said. He said, if I were to list the biggest threat, not in the near term, but in the short, medium term, it's the fact that America is 20 trillion million in the hole. And who owns most of that debt? The country of China. Our elected officials have ignored our concerns. And people all over the world are demanding accountability of their elected officials. Now take a look at the Kansas Senate. I've been around a long time. I've had a very supportive family. They've allowed me to serve. But I've never seen a turnover in election like I saw in the last election 2 years ago. In the Kansas, we had 5 Republican Senate retirements. They said, I'm done. We had 1 Democrat retirement. We had 6 Republicans beat in primary elections, highly unusual. That showed an unsettled electorate. We had 2 people who were elected, 1 beating a former House member and 1 beating a former senator. So 1/3 of the Kansas Senate came here as a new Senate. The people said, I want to change. In 2016, Britain voted for Brexit. They wanted government close to home. They exited the EU. And right after that, in 2017, America said, I'm going to elect Donald Trump. I'm tired of the people who have been in control, who come from the Senate and the House, those who are politicians, those who are governors. They said, I'm done. They elected an outsider. I would suggest to you this has nothing to do with ALEC allowing the Convention of States to come talk to the legislators. This is about a populist movement that is growing. And it's going to be more concern 2 years from now when we run for re-election if we haven't fixed this. Twice in Kansas history, we've accomplished the 2/3 vote to join a convention. Once was in 1978, SCR 1661 passed the House and Senate with a 2/3 vote, requesting and applying to the Congress to promote or to call a convention for the purpose of proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which would require that in the absence of a statutorily defined national emergency, total federal appropriations shall not exceed total estimated federal revenues. In 1978, we had a runaway deficit that we've ignored. In 1995, we passed out of both chambers, 2/3 vote, HCR 5008, requesting that the federal government cease and desist mandates beyond the scope of its constitutionally delegated powers. There have been many times the people of Kansas have said, help us bring government closer to home. Give the states the authority to set some standards. Get out of control spending under control, and that's what they're doing today. I stand here with this bill thinking that I'll retire someday, and I'll probably be able to collect Social Security, but I know for a fact my children, my grandchildren, will not have that benefit. They will not have that security because the money will be all gone. Our health care spending is inflated far beyond our economic growth. Pharmaceutical drugs are up 6.3% a year. Federal spending on all these things it's just growing out of line. And once again, the U.S. Senate and Congress lifted the ceiling on our debt limit. They did not discuss reining in frivolous spending. So I'm going to stand with the people. I'm going to be part of a movement. I want Kansas to be at the table. And it's harder for us to get there. If this took a majority vote, we would have already passed this constitutional convention. It would have already been passed. But unfortunately in Kansas, as the senator from Butler said, it takes a 2/3 vote. It's a bigger lift. But it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for our children. It's the right thing to do for our state. And I hope that you join us.
Are there questions for the senator from Butler? Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to thank the senator from Butler for carrying this and doing such a great job of explaining it. I did want to talk a little bit about a history where a convention of the states almost succeeded, but it failed. And that was the attempt to convene the states prior to the Civil War. It was called the Washington Conference Convention. It met for 3 weeks. And it is marked as the largest general convention in American history. However, they didn't have the communication tools we have, and it was called on very short notice. But by the time of adjournment, the Assembly had recommended an amendment that well may have prevented the Civil War. It could have put slavery on track for extinction without bloodshed and the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. Thank you.
Further questions for Senator from Butler? Seeing none, Senator, you may close. Oh, you want to yield to the Senator from Brown?
I'll yield to the senator.
Senator from Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Caught me a little bit sleepy there. You know, I read somewhere that when the convention was called for the 13 states under the Articles of Confederation, that there were three very interesting characters who weren't present: Samuel Adams, John Hancock, and Patrick Henry. If somebody can dispute that, I'd like to know, but I did read that, and there are commentaries that say if any one of those figures had been there, the Constitution of the United States would not have been adopted. And I think we've already heard some of the reasons as to why, because those three guys were pretty much opposed to a big federal government. They wanted sovereignty kept with the individual and several states. And so they would have argued, and you can, you know, take that for what it is, but I guess my concerns stem from partly some of the questions that have been asked on the floor today. If you're going to have a convention, a ratifying convention, which this calls on a convention to propose amendments, so that's just one step in the process. But once that's achieved, you have amendments that then have to be ratified by the states. I'm not sure what the process for ratifying is. I'm not sure whether that's this body. I'm not sure whether those are delegates that are chosen. I'm not sure of a nominating process, whether it exists. I'm not sure, even for a convention, who the delegates are going to be or how they're going to be selected. I, for one, would like to have a say in that. And I think that process needs to be in place if we're going to call a convention. You know, back in 2014, we've heard comments about federal spending and all of this, and we all have an opportunity to voice our opinions through elections on who we send to Washington to represent us. We all have opportunity to look at their voting records to see how they're voting on those measures, on Social Security issues, etc. And yet, in this body, I believe, I can't remember, but I believe, if somebody can maybe check the record, I believe there were, at the time in 2014, nearly every senator endorsed the senator that was up for re-election at the federal level. I know I didn't, but I know that nearly everyone else in this chamber at that time did, knowing full well the voting records of those we send to Washington. So when people say we can't change it, the people in Washington aren't going to change it, well, maybe that's because there needs to be a change of heart in each of us. Maybe we need to do more thorough work in vetting who we're sending to Washington. Maybe we need to be looking closely at their voting and what they're doing, not just taking what we read in the paper, etc. Anyway, there are many things that we do as individuals that impact who we send to Washington. But getting back to the ratifying or the fact of delegates being sent to a convention, how we choose them, how we nominate them, are they going to be party nominated? Are they going to be partisan delegates? Are they going to be nonpartisan? Will they be selected? I mean, I read over a bunch of stuff today that the reviser gave me on calling constitutional conventions, rulings, etc. Much of what I've heard on the floor today is correct. And I will tell you, in my district, this is a very divided issue. I have people for, I have people against. And they all are really concerned about our federal government and the direction we're going. I share those concerns. Most of you know I have 6 daughters, and 4 of them are married, and I have 3 granddaughters and 2 on the way. You know how concerned I am with the state spending. You've heard me state it here on the floor. I guess I have the same concerns as the 3 aforementioned patriots Our country was organized under Articles of Confederation for a reason. It was so that the several states would retain each individually their sovereignty. The issue that we're dealing with today is almost, and I'll speak in a little bit of, if you understand Calvinism versus free state, this is just about as controversial as that is to those people. And they're very adamant about their arguments on either side of it. But we have a current amendment process in place. And I've asked a person this morning, if all of the organizational effort that had been put into both sides of this were put in to demanding from our Congress that they propose a constitutional amendment and that the states be asked to ratify it, would we be getting some amendments? Because I haven't seen the push. I'd like to, because I think we need to demand from our elected official, if they're running for the U.S. Senate, 2 terms, sign it, and guarantee me you'll work for an amendment to propose that we can support an amendment to limit terms to the federal level. We aren't doing that. But I'm saying the organizational effort that was put into this today, you see people in the gallery, you see people across the state of Kansas, we're all getting flooded with emails, pro and con. Why not try the other? I'm just not there yet, I guess some would say. We've seen as stated earlier, we've seen the U.S. Constitution amended 27 times, so we know it can be done. And I guess it takes the willpower of the people to get our federal elected officials to do that. And this is an Article 5, another alternative, where the states can call a convention. I understand that. But I just have so many questions about how that convention is going to function. Who will be representing me? And if the senator can explain that in his closing statements, maybe he can change my opinion. But is it going to be him? Is it going to be members that are elected? Is it going to be somebody who's wanting to run for higher office and uses the position to elevate themselves? What are the rules going to be? Are they going to have a rule? Will we adopt a rule that says if you go to the convention, you can't run for public office, for federal office for 10 years? I think that'd be a great rule. But we don't have, I don't know where that exists. All I see is a proposal in front of me to call a convention. When the party has to convene to nominate, to put a person in this seat, should I vacate it? For whatever reason, there are rules governing that little convention. If there are rules governing an Article 5 convention and how it's going to function, how it's going to take place, what the nominating process is, how those people are then voted on and going to be elected as my delegate, I want to know it. I want to see it. Because that's what I need. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you recognizing, I appreciate your yielding, Senator, and I guess I'm just being extremely cautious here. And I thank the body for putting up with my speech here. I do think that Sammy Adams and John Hancock and Patrick Henry, they wanted the states to have the sovereignty. And we got a constitution that many say they would not have adopted. I'm not advocating for that, but I do think that being here today, I need to speak my piece. So thank you.
Senator from Butler, just so you know, there are other senators seeking recognition now, if you would like to yield.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to respond a little bit, and probably against my better judgment, I will yield one more time before I close. But since I have the floor in order, ratification is an already predetermined process, which we just saw was used even within the lifetime of the minority leader, 71 and in the 90s. So that process is in place. But as to the process of the convention, again, I mean, I understand that cloud, but those rules don't exist till the convention exists. And quite frankly, it's irrelevant because the underlying rule of one state, one vote takes care of the issue of how the state performs. Now, given the comments, I think I would get support if I could guarantee that that person at the convention were the senator from Brown. But I can't. I mean, that's not the way the process works. I mean, we have a structured process of order. Like it or not, we need to trust the process. It works pretty good. And we as a legislature would decide who the delegates would be or wouldn't be or what the restraints are them or are not on them at the time we set the convention. A lot of that's just a cloud around fear, and I get it, and I get the fear is real. But fear can be real yet unfounded. And I think that's what we're addressing here. So with that, Mr. Chairman, hopefully not against my better judgment, I yield to the Senator from Shawnee, Senator Hensley.
Senator from Shawnee.
Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of those in the gallery, I wanted to be sure that they understood that this concurrent resolution is on general orders and will be passed on to final action, and we will not be voting on this until tomorrow. I wanted everybody to be sure that they understood what the process is in this case. And the senator from Butler probably has not seen the senator from Lynn standing behind him, so he'll, actually I'll yield to the senator from Lynn.
Senator from Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the good senator from Shawnee. Some of you in the body may not know my history with this. I've been involved with for several years with a group called the Assembly of State Legislators. We started out as the Mount Vernon Assembly. I was like a majority of people. I was afraid of this. The idea of us amending our U.S. Constitution is big. It's a heavy lift. And I had a constituent call me, asked me to start looking into it, and I did. Coincidentally, 2 weeks later, after I started researching it, nobody knew I was looking into it. I got a call from the Speaker Pro Tem from Ohio asking me to be on a national group to establish rules in case a convention was ever called. So for 4 years, a group of Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, moderates, liberals worked together from over 30 different states to establish a baseline of rules in case a convention was called. And it was a good taste of what would happen if we actually did have a convention. But the good senator from Butler is correct. There is nothing in law that establishes the rules for a convention. What we did was establish a baseline that could possibly be used to help give peace of mind. Our federal government is out of control, and we know that by the words of the good senator from Sedgwick. The spending is at all-time highs. And for those of you that don't know, in 1978, this body passed by 2/3 a resolution for a balanced budget. Yes, we've added 2 more topics to this resolution, but it was passed in 1978 in Kansas to call for a balanced budget convention to amend. We keep using the terminology constitutional convention or convention of the Constitution. It's a convention to amend the Constitution. It is not to rewrite the Constitution. And to be clear, 38 states have to ratify. 38 states have to agree that this is a good amendment for our Constitution. The other thing I would bring to your attention is we have not seen it in many years, an amendment to our Constitution. But just think about it. If we wouldn't have amended, there are several people in this chamber who would not have been able to vote. The 15th Amendment made sure that we could vote, that we could not be discriminated based on race and color. The 19th Amendment, women's suffrage, allowed women to vote. Our Constitution is a wonderful document, but it is not a perfect document. We do need to address the balanced budget at the federal level. And for that, I stand with the good senator from Butler in carrying this resolution.
Senator from Butler, there are other senators seeking recognition.
So that would be back to me to yield then. I will yield to the senator from Johnson.
Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Senator from Butler, for yielding. We sat next to each other in Fed and State. You know, this is something that I've kind of tossed and turned a little bit about lately. And I think the senator from Butler spelled it out pretty easy for me. When you look at the Constitution and then you look at the court's opinions, and how far we've gotten away from the original Constitution. I like to think I'm a originalist. I've stated that before in committee. And I believe, you know, it's the power's in our hands to do right. And, you know, we talked about the debt clock and how Congress is not doing it. We did it last year here when we passed the budget and we had a $97.4 million we wiped out loan. And we layered a bunch of capers money. We played games. And I just believe the people in this building and the people in the U.S. Congress are out of control right now. And, you know, I go back to the original document, we the people, and you know, I know the people in this body can't fix it. I know the people in D.C. and the U.S. Congress can't fix it. I believe it's now time to give this to the people. I've thought long and hard. The people are asking us to give them the power back to fix their government. And I'm not going to be afraid of what might be done because I think they will do more right than we can in the courts. And so I urge the bodies to support this. Thank you.
Senator from Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please tell me there's no one standing behind me.
Absolutely not. Senator from Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the senators from Johnson, Lynn, and Johnny for not making me regret my yield, but I appreciate all voices. I really do. I would just close with support of the comments, obviously a favor, but just as we individually as elected representatives are agents of our constituents, right? They send us here and we represent them and we function for them to our best ability. If we get unwieldy and out of line, it is their right, it's their duty, if you will, to make a decision to change that, right, to replace it. It functions a little differently, but the people we are a federation of states. And the federal government is an agent given limited powers, originally, by the states. And when it gets out of hand, they're our agent. And it is within our right, and I would say duty, to come together, if we can, and make the appropriate changes. It is messy, but it is a wonderful form of government. I believe divinely inspired. I don't know how humanity could come up with what we have. And it is imperfect because we are humans. But it is a wonderful form of government that is bottom up. By the way, we're the bottom, right? The people. We're the bottom that control the machine. So I ask you to join me in this, to give us a seat at the table and pass this resolution. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rise and report SCR 1611 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Chair recognizes Majority Leader from Johnson County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
The clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Denning, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders with Senator Peterson in the chair. Recommended Senate concurrent resolution 1611 be amended by the adoption of the committee amendments and the resolution be adopted and passed as amended.
The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson, to adopt the committee report.
I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 437 by Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning sales and compensating use tax. Senate Bill 438 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning health and health care. Senate Bill 439 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning criminal procedure. Senate Bill 440 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning sales and compensating use tax. Senate Bill 441 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act regulating traffic.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 437 through Senate Bill 441. Correction and approval of the journal. Reports of standing committees. The clerk will read.
Madam President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2567 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion that the bill is of non-controversial nature, be placed on the consent calendar. Senator Wilborn, chairperson.
Are there announcements? Chair recognizes Senator from Miami, Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I want to thank my Senate Select Committee on Education Finance for being there on time for our meeting today. And I just want to let you know that we will be meeting again on Monday, March 12th at 3:30 p.m. And so we are also putting together our schedule for that week following. And as soon as we get the rooms finalized, we will get that to you so that you can make plans accordingly. Thank you.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Joint Committee on Information Technology will meet tomorrow at noon, and lunch will be provided. Thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As noted on your desk, if you'll see the yellow flyer reminding you that on Friday there will be a program, Healthy Kansans Caucus, on opioids around the states and legislation that's been put in place, among other things. I know many of us still have committee meetings, but if you don't, it will be an excellent topic. Thank you.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Just a reminder, Senator Ag and Natural Resources, we will be meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30 to take up the hearing on the Pet Animal Act.
Are there additional announcements? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Majority Leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I do have a couple of announcements. The Senate will not be on general orders tomorrow, but we will be on final action. So no general orders tomorrow. And when we get on final action tomorrow, we have one bill on the calendar on page 2. It's House Bill 2435. We'll be voting on that bill as well tomorrow during final action. Mr. Vice President, I move the Senate adjourn until 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, March 8th, 2018.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The Senate is adjourned.